What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next we are going to go over 5 key comics that are currently trending down. I've also got a giveaway, so stay tuned for the details on how to get that book. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So I've recently started doing some videos where I'm talking about 5 books that are either currently trending up or trending down. Basically, when I'm doing my weekly Heritage comic auction, comic book pricing, when I'm pricing books for that auction, I see books that maybe don't end up on my top 10 surprising sales videos because they don't have a real shocking sale or something like that, but I do see their trends where they're moving up or down. So I thought it would be useful to let people know about which books are moving up, which books are moving down, that kind of thing. Now, there are definitely more books trending down right now than up, but like you saw in my prior video that I did on this, there are books trending up as well. Now, one of the pieces of feedback I got in my last trending down video was that there were a few people that were saying, oh, these aren't real keys, these aren't, these are just spec keys, that kind of thing. So, I have a video for you. So this time, I pulled some big keys that are also trending down. And so I just want to show it's not just those spec keys, there are books across the board that are trending down. So it's something where, yeah, you can have books go down whether it's a big key or not. Also, I kind of disagree with a lot of those comments because if a book is selling for thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, whether you like that character or not, or whether you think it's a spec book or not, that's a key. Like Werewolf by Night 32, yeah, it's going down a lot right now, but a 9.8 of that book is like $50,000 or $60,000. So these are expensive books, they are real keys, it's just a lot of those got ahead of themselves. And that's the same thing that we've got here. Now, I also mentioned that I have a giveaway. I really appreciate all the subscriptions, all the likes, all the comments, everything. And so I feel like another pretty cool book to give away this month. And this one I just showed in one of my recent unboxings is Submariner number 5. And so this is the first appearance of Tiger Shark. This is a pretty key Submariner villain, an awesome John Buscema cover. I talked about this one before, that it's got this, I feel like it's got a really cool throwback to the Good Girl Art type covers where you've got the hero coming in through the back, saving the woman in the red dress. She's blue, but it's still saving the woman in the red dress. And I think this is such a cool book. The interior art, I did a flip through of it because I did grading on this one too, is pretty great. I like the depiction of Tiger Shark on the interior. So, but yeah, so that's the giveaway. If you want a chance to get this book, leave a comment, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and in the comment leave hashtag Tiger Shark. I'll put the text right here. Make sure you put the text right next to the hashtag or it won't come up in the search. All right, so now let's get on to these 5 books that are trending down. I decided, because people were saying that, I wasn't picking some big keys for that one, I decided to start with one of the biggest. So the first one that we're going to talk about is Amazing Fantasy number 15, first appearance of Spider-Man. I have talked about this book quite a bit because earlier this year I saw this book getting out of hand with the prices. And so I had talked about that. Be cautious. This feels like what we've seen with a lot of other books. Even though it's such a big key, they can still go down. When we had comic prices drop back in 2020, you saw, even Batman number 1 was coming down. Captain America number 1 was coming down. Marvel Comics number 1 was coming down. There is no book that is completely free of the possibility of dropping, no matter how big it is. They can all get overheated if people are just a little too excited at the time, which is what we saw happen last year and in the earlier parts of this year. All right, so here we've got Amazing Fantasy 15. I've got the chart up there from GPA. And now these ones are a little bit tougher because they're bigger keys. They don't sell quite as often, but generally across the board, you can see these books dropping across all grades. Now, there are some where you might not have a sale more than once a year for really high grades or once every 8-10 months. And so, yeah, it would still look like it's hitting a peak, but it may have gone even higher if it had been selling earlier in the year. And I'll talk about that a little later with one of the other books that's on here. So, Amazing Fantasy 15, First grade here is a 7.0. It hit a high of $241,500. The current price I have at $190,000, but the last sale was actually $168,000. So at the current price, down around 21% from that high, and with the last sale down around 30% from that high. This is what I was talking about, where you've got these books that just got really overheated, a lot of FOMO on this book, and I mean, imagine if you were the one that paid $241,000 and the last sale was $168,000. Even if you've got the money for that book, if you've got a lot of money, $70,000 is still a lot. That's got to hurt a little bit, and that's where that FOMO really comes in. The next grade is a 5.0 with a high of $84,000. There is a sale in the data of $100,000, but I couldn't find a record of that sale, so I'm not totally trusting it because it really seemed out of line with a lot of the other sales that I saw. So I've got the high sale at $84,000. Current price at $55,000, so it's down about 35% right now. Then we've got the 2.5, this one with a high sale of $52,800, with the current price being $36,000, down around 32%. Now, this is a book that across the board is down around 30 to 35%. That's a pretty significant drop for a book that is this expensive. I don't know how much further it will really drop. I think this book in the lower to mid grades probably will bottom out around $12,000 per grade point, which is where it's kind of getting with a couple of the sales that we've had recently. But if we have a continued economic decline, definitely any book can go down further. But from what I've seen, I think around $12,000 per grade point on the lower grades is about where it'll be. The upper grades, it gets more expensive. You don't have a linear price change as the books go up, so that's why a 7.0 is selling for around $20,000 to $24,000 per point, whereas you've got that 2.0 to 2.5 that might be selling for around $12,000 to $13,000 a point. All right, now the next book on the list. This is Journey into Mystery, number 85. This is the first appearance of Loki, the first appearance of Heimdall, the first cameo of Odin, the first appearance of Asgard, and the third appearance of Thor. This is a big, major key book, and it has seen some major declines since the Loki show. This was a book that you had a massive spike in the price of this book with Loki last year, with that show last summer, because that was really peak comic boom. So this one will see a little more drop in the book because it had much more of an impact from that show. This is also one where you can see I don't really have any of the high grade copies because the high grade ones, they don't sell as often. So you're generally going to see something that looks like an uptrend, because if you took out all those sales in the middle, like you can see on that chart there, yeah, the book is trending up. It's just that it's missing out on a lot of those really peak sales that happened last year because it just doesn't sell as often in those high grades because it's much more rare. So the first grade I'm talking about here is a 5.0. It had a high sale of $7,000. The current price is $3,800, a drop of 46%. Then we've got the 3.0 with a high sale of $3,600, current price around $2,000, a drop of 44%, and the 2.0 with a high sale of $3,500, current price $1,700, a drop of 51%. So you can see this one has a bigger swing on the prices than we saw with Amazing Fantasy 15 because it really had those peak big sales last summer with that show. So we're seeing drops of around 45 to 50% from that peak price instead of the 30 to 35%. Now, this is a book that I think has some pretty solid potential moving forward because we're getting another season of the show. He is a very popular character. I think it's probably starting to get down around to the point where it might be making that turn. Again, now is a time to be a little cautious. Pick your book, find a book that you really like the presentation of if you want to go for this, and don't be too hasty when picking up any of the books that I'm talking about here, because even if they are coming down, they could potentially come down some more, but you never know when things will turn up again. So that's why just keep them on your list, and if you see a book that's at the price that you're comfortable with, go for it. All right, so now number 3, this is a book that pretty much everybody knows, most people love. This is Incredible Hulk number 181, the first full appearance of Wolverine, and I know his first time you see him is in Hulk 180, but the big book, the book that most people really want, is 181. So with this book, I've got a couple things to talk about with this one, especially up when we're talking about the 9.8 grade. But you can see in the chart there, it's had a few different spikes over time. It had that spike early last year. It was really peaking kind of in the April to May timeframe. Then it dropped off really, really fast. returned up a little bit again earlier this year, and it's trending down again. So the three grades I'm talking about here are a 9.6, an 8.0, and a 5.0. To get that wider range of prices on this book, also grades that you see sales fairly regularly, and that's something I'm going to talk about a little later. So in the 9.6, the high sale was $36,000. The current price around $26,000, difference of 28%. Then we've got the 8.0, the high sale of $10,800. Current price around $6,900, a drop of 36%. And then the 5.0, high sale of $6,000, the current price around $4,200, a drop of 30%. So this is a book that is dropping around 30 to 35% across most grades. Now, the reason I didn't talk about a 9.8 was that with the 9.8s, we didn't have really any sell last year during the comic boom. I think what happened with the 9.8s on this book is that prices were going up so fast that people that own them were maybe afraid to put the book up for sale and miss out on some gains on that book. And ultimately what they ended up doing was I think they missed out on those peak prices. Because when we were in that May, June timeframe of last year, I thought if a 181 went up for sale, it was going to go for probably $120,000 to $140,000. But what we've seen recently, we've had a couple come up for sale this year, and they've sold for around high 90s to low 100s. And so because that book in a 9.8 hasn't come up for sale very often, you have what looks like a general trend up in that grade. But based on what you can see when you had books that were selling a lot over the last year, you see this peak last year and then this decline. But with the 9.8, it never had a chance to have that peak, so it's looking like a general trend up. But I do think if it would have sold last year in the kind of the peak FOMO for a lot of these books, I think it would have hit above 100,000, maybe 120 to 140,000. Similar to what we saw with Giant Size X-Men #1, which had peak sales around 80,000, and it now goes for around 40. And so, yeah, it's still a big trend up from last year. And that's one of the things that I think is a big takeaway for all of these, is that even if they're trending down, these books are still up from last year. They have still, on average, trended up, but they have that big blip in the middle, and you can really see it here where you had those peak, really high prices from last year. But I think this is a book that, if it's coming down, it's only going to come down for so long. I know there are a lot of them out there. That's something a lot of people talk about, that when Wolverine comes, maybe the market will get flooded with them, but there are always a lot of these books out for sale. I don't think it's ever really something where it gets flooded, because this book sells all the time for a lot of money, and I think just the more coverage and press that that character gets will on average drive up the price of this book, because I don't know hardly anyone that doesn't want a copy of this book. It's just one of those marquee Bronze Age books. It always generally trends up. And so even though we're in kind of a correction moment right now, I would see this trend up continuing long term, especially with the MCU potentially bringing in this character. I can't imagine they won't. Now, one thing to also just I'd like to talk about with this book is that there is a single 9.9 out there. I would love to see that book come up for sale on kind of like a public platform, whether it's Heritage or Comic Link or Comic Connect, something like that. I think that book would almost guaranteed go over $1 million. Multiple millions is, I think, very possible, because it is the single highest graded copy. The only thing that really hurts it is in an old CGC labeled slab, and so I think it's very unlikely that somebody's going to ever really want to risk moving that into a new slab, so you're stuck with an old slab with that one. All right, now number 4. This is one of the most popular Copper Age books that's out there, arguably the most popular Copper Age book that's out there. This is Amazing Spider-Man number 300, the first full appearance of Venom, and just that classic Todd McFarlane cover that has been swiped over and over and over again. And this is a book that, similar to Loki, it definitely spiked because of some FOMO last year with the Venom movie, some spec around the Venom movie. Also, the very popular Venom storyline that was going on last year. I think that had a lot of people really getting interested in this book, even more so than normal. So I've got 3 grades I'm talking about here, a 9.8, a 9.0, and an 8.0. This is actually the most graded book on the CGC census. There are a ton of these books out there. There are a ton of them graded. They sell all the time. It is a very popular book. The 9.8 had a peak sale, and I'm talking about direct editions here, not the newsstand, because newsstand is another story. The 9.8 had a peak sale of $9,200 with the current price of approximately $5,000, down 46%. The 9.0 had a high sale of $1,200 with the current price being $680, a drop of 43%. And the 8.0 had a high sale of $922. The current price is at $575, a drop of 38%. So this is a book that is down 40 to 45%, very similar to Loki. So the books that didn't really have the movie spec or that type of hype around it, we see them dropping around 30 to 35%. The books that had a little more spec with these big keys are dropping around 40 to 45%. And one thing I think is important to note is that that is different from what we saw with those books that are maybe not quite as much blue chip in terms of the key value of the book. Those books spiked more and then dropped more. So you saw drops of generally around 55 to 65% in those books. These books, being a little more blue chip, whatever you want to say, they don't spike quite as much, but then they don't drop quite as much. And so that's where you can say it's a little safer type book to buy than some of those spec ones. But the spec books, because you've got that bigger spike into a lot of that spec on those books, you have the potential, if you sell at the right moment, to make more money buying those. So that's what really gets people to want to go for those versus something more stable like these. Now, when we're talking about Venom, I think this is always a great book to own. Now, you do not have to rush out to buy this book. This is a book that, like I said, there are a ton of them out there. They sell all the time. Just wait for the right auction, pick the price you're comfortable at, make that bid. If it doesn't happen, fine. If it does, great, you've got your book. But this is one that also you can see over the long term, it just generally trends up. You have ups and downs, like with anything, but it just generally trends up. He is one of the most popular villains out there. It is a Spider-Man character. Spider-Man is the most popular character out there, so it's not a high-risk book, but you do not need to rush out and overpay for it. All right, now the last one we're going to talk about here. This is another big Silver Age key. This is Daredevil #1, the first appearance of Matt Murdock as Daredevil. And this was a book that got a little hyped up on speculation around Daredevil coming into the MCU officially and being part of that Spider-Man No Way Home movie. Now, we never actually saw Daredevil, but we did see Matt Murdock as his lawyer character. But there's also been news recently about him officially coming back into the MCU, and so I think that's gotten a little more interest back in this book. But this was one of the books that peaked early last year. It was one of the earlier big movers with the comic boom in the April, May, June timeframe. And you can see that big peak there on that graph. I've got 3 grades I'm going to talk about. We've got the 8.5, the 7.0, and the 2.5 to get a nice wide range of these books. Now, the 8.5 had a high sale of $26,400. Current price is around $17,600, drop of 33%. The 7.0 high sale of $16,200. Current price I have is around $9,500, but the last sale was $7,800. I actually talked about that sale recently. That was a massive drop for that book. I think that was probably a bit of an outlier, the $7,800 sale, and that's why I have it priced around $9,500, but still a drop of 41% at that $9,500 price and a drop of 52% at that $7,800 price. Then the last one, to get a book that's maybe a little more affordable for this big Silver Age key, we've got the 2.5, high sale of $4,700. It's down to around $2,800, a drop of 40%. So again, we've got a book here that is dropping anywhere from around the mid-30s to 40%, and we've got some outliers here where it went up to 50%. And this is one that had a little spec around it. It is one that definitely was spiking because of that news, in addition to just the general increase with the rest of the comic market. And so that's why I think it's on the little bit of the higher end, especially for a major Silver Age book like this. But I do think it is a great cover. You've got Spider-Man on the cover, you've got Daredevil in his original yellow costume, and like I mentioned, we've also got news that we are very likely getting the Daredevil back in the MCU. Now, this is a big Silver Age key. I don't consider it in the top tier of Silver Age keys, of the Silver Age #1 first appearance type books, but it's right below that. So this is one that is a pretty safe book to own, but I think it just got a little too much ahead of itself over the last year. And I could see this one drop a little bit more. It's possible that that $7,800 sale is a little more like where it should be at, going around $1,000 per point, instead of up around $2,000 a point where it was. But still, I think it is a great book to own long term. all of these books that I've talked about here today are great books to own long term, but they are coming down right now. And so to me, it's just be cautious with your purchases, be picky with your purchases. That's something I've really been stressing a lot lately. Be picky, pick the price that works well for you, pick a cover that presents well, maybe not missing any big pieces out of the front of the cover, that kind of thing. Pick that book that you're going to be happy with, because it could still go down more, but if you're comfortable with the price you paid, there's not really a problem there. All right, so those are the 5 books. I think the big takeaway here in comparison to my last video is that these bigger blue chip, call it type keys, they aren't going to have as big of a swing on the upside, and they aren't going to end up having then as big of a swing on the downside. The other books that I talked about, you had jumps of 300, 400, 500%, and then they drop 50 to 60%. These books, you had jumps of 200 to 300%, and then they're dropping 30 to 40%. And so they're just a little more stable, but there are very few books, if any, that are free from speculation, movies, that kind of thing impacting the value of the books. And then if there's some type of drop off, whether it's the economy or the movie has ended, didn't do well, you lose that spec value on the book, they can drop. There are some exceptions, maybe Action 1, maybe Detective Comics 27, but like I talked about earlier in the video, we even saw drops in Batman 1. Marvel Comics 1, Captain America Comics #1, the biggest of the big Golden Age keys. In 2020, we saw those books come down. And so you just always have to be aware that there is no book that is the perfect book to buy that never goes down. It's always possible. But you can buy these bigger blue chip books and have a safer long-term investment if that's what you're trying to do. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember, I've got the giveaway, Submariner #5, first appearance of Tiger Shark. Leave a comment, #TigerShark, and you'll have a chance to get this book. Again, if you enjoyed this video, please like the video, leave a comment. I've got more videos over here if you'd like to watch some of my other videos, and the subscription button right here if you'd like to subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.